Morning, everyone. Have a seat. Thank you. So as you can tell, I am not Mr. Monroe. He has a breakfast this morning. We're hosting heads and chairs here at the school. So if you see any of them around, please give them a warm QMS welcome. Today, I am reading you a story. This is a short story called The Interlopers by Saki. That's the pen name. His actual name is Hector Monroe. No relation. It was originally published in 1919. In a forest of mixed growth somewhere on the eastern spurs of Carpathians, a man stood one winter night, watching and listening, as though he waited for some beast of the woods to come within the range of his vision, and later of his rifle. But the game for whose presence he kept so keen an outlook was none that figured in the sportsman's calendar as lawful and proper for the chase. Ulrich von Grudges patrolled the dark forest in quest of a human enemy. The forest lands of Grudges were of wide extent and well stocked with game. The narrow strip of precipitous woodland that lay on its outskirts was not remarkable for the game it harbored or the shooting it afforded, but it was the most jealously guarded of all its owner's territorial possessions. A famous lawsuit in the days of his grandfather had wrested it from the illegal possession of a neighboring family of petty landowners. The dispossessed party had never acquiesced in the judgment of the courts, and long series of poaching affrays and similar scandals had embittered the relationships between the families for 3 generations. The neighbor feud had grown into a personal one, since Ulrich had come to be the head of his family. If there was a man in the world whom he detested and wished ill to, it was George Neyman, the inheritor of the quarrel and the tireless game snatcher and raider of the disputed border forest. The feud might perhaps have died down or been compromised if the personal ill will of the two men had not stood in the way. As boys, they had thirsted for one another's blood. As men, each prayed that banded together his foresters to watch the dark forest, not in the quest of 4-footed quarry, but to keep a lookout for the prowling thieves whom he suspected of being afoot from across the land boundary. The roebuck, which usually kept in shelter hollows during a storm wind, were running like driven things to the night, and there was movement and unrest among the creatures that were wont to sleep through the dark hours. Assuredly, there was a disturbing element in the forest, and Ulrich could guess the quarter from whence it came. He strayed away by himself from the watchers whom he had placed in ambush on the crest of the hill, and wandered far down the steep slopes amid the wild tangle of undergrowth, peering through the tree trunks and listening through the whistling and skirling of the wind, the restless beating of the branches for sight and sound. Of the marauders, if only on this wild night, in this dark lone spot, he might come across George Neyman. Man to man, with none to witness, that was the wish that was uppermost in his thoughts. And as he stepped round the trunk of a huge beech, he came face to face with the man he sought. The two enemies stood glaring for a long, silent moment. Each had a rifle in his hand. Each had hate in his heart and murder uppermost in his mind. The chance had come to give full play to passions of a lifetime. But a man who has been brought up under the code of restraining civilization cannot easily nerve himself to shoot down his neighbor in cold blood and without word spoken, except for an offense against his hearth and honor. And before the moment of hesitation had given way to action, a deed of nature's own violence overwhelmed them both. A fierce shriek of the storm had been answered by splitting crash over heads, and ere they could leap aside, a mass of falling beech tree had thundered down on them. Ulrich von Gradwitz found himself stretched on the ground, one arm numb beneath him and the other held almost as helplessly in a tight tangle of forked branches. While both legs were pinned beneath the fallen mass, his heavy shooting boots had saved his feet from being crushed to pieces. But if his fractures were not as serious as they might have been, at least it was evident that he could not move from his present position till someone came to release him. The drops of blood from his eyelashes, before he could take in the general view of the disaster, blinded him. At his side, so near that under ordinary circumstances could almost have touched him, lay George Naaman, alive and struggling, but obviously as helplessly pinned down as himself. All round them lay a thick, strewn wreckage of splintered branches and broken twigs. Relief at being alive and exasperation at his captive plight brought a strange medley of pious thank offerings and sharp curses to Ulrich's lips. George, who was nearly blinded with blood, which trickled across his eyes, stopped his struggling for a moment to listen, and then gave a short, snarling laugh. "So you're not killed, as you ought to be, but you're caught anyway," he cried. "Caught fast. Ho, what a jest. Ulrich von Gradwitz, snared in his stolen forest. There's real justice for you." And he laughed again, mockingly and savagely. "I'm caught in my own forest land," retorted Ulrich. "When my men come to release us, you will wish, perhaps, that you were in a better plight than caught poaching on a neighbor's land. Shame on you." George was silent for a moment, then he answered quietly, "Are you sure that your men will find much to release? I have men too in the forest tonight, close behind me, and they will be here first and do the releasing. When they drag me out from under these cursed branches, it won't need much clumsiness on their part to roll this massive trunk right over on the top of you. Your men will find you dead under a fallen beech tree. For form's sake, I shall send my condolences to your family." "It is a useful hint," said Ulrich fiercely. "My men had orders to follow in 10 minutes, 7 of which must have gone by already. When they get me out, I will remember the hint. Only as you will have met your death poaching on my lands, I don't think I can decently send any message of condolence to your family." "Good," snarled George. "Good. We fight this quarrel out to the death. You and I and our foresters, with no cursed interlopers to come between us, death, and damnation to you, Ulrich von Gradwitz. The same to you, George Naaman, forest thief, game snatcher." Both men spoke with the bitterness of possible defeat before them, for each knew that it might be long before his men would seek him out or find him. It was a bare matter of chance which party would arrive first on the scene. Both had now given up the useless struggle to free themselves from the mass of wood that held them down. Ulrich limited his endeavors to an effort to bring his one partially free arm near enough to his outer coat pocket to draw out a wine flask. Even when he had accomplished that operation, it was long before he could manage the unscrewing of the stopper or get any of the liquid down his throat. But what a heaven-sent drought it seemed. It was an open winter, and little snow had fallen as yet, hence the captives suffered less from the cold that might have been the case at the season of the year. Nevertheless, the wine was warming, reviving the wounded man, and he looked across with something like a throb of pity to where his enemy lay, just keeping the groans of pain and weariness from crossing his lips. "Could you reach this flask if I threw it over to you?" asked Ulrich suddenly. "There is good wine in it, and one may as well be as comfortable as one can. Let us drink, even if tonight one of us dies." "No, I can scarcely see anything. There is so much blood caked around my eyes," said George. "And in any case, I don't drink wine with the enemy." Ulrich was silent for a few minutes and lay listening to the weary screeching of the wind. An idea was slowly forming and growing in his brain. An idea that gained strength every time that he looked across at the man who was fighting so grimly against pain and exhaustion. In the pain and languor of Ulrich himself was feeling the old fierce hatred seemed to be dying down. "Neighbor," he said presently, "do as you please if your men come first. It was a fair compact. But as for me, I've changed my mind. If my men are here first to come, you shall be the first to be helped, as though you were my guest. We have quarreled like devils all our lives over this stupid strip of forest, where the trees can't even stand upright in a breath of wind. Lying here tonight thinking, I've come to think that we've been rather fools. There are better things in life than getting the better of a boundary dispute. Neighbor, if you will help me to bury the old quarrel, I will ask you to be my friend." George Naiman was silent for a long time. Ulrich thought perhaps he had fainted with the pain of his injuries. Then he spoke slowly and in jerks. "How the whole region would stare and gabble if we rode into the market square together. No one living can remember seeing a Naiman and a von Grudges talking to one another in friendship. And what peace there would be among the forester folk if we ended our feud tonight. And if we chose to make peace among our people, there is none other to interfere, no interlopers from outside. You would come and keep the Sylvester night beneath my roof, and I would come and feast on some high day at your castle. I would never fire a shot on your land, save when you invited me as a guest, and you should come and shoot with me down in the marshes where the wild fowl are. In all the countryside, there are none that could hinder if we willed to make peace. I never thought to have wanted to do other than hate you all my life. But I think I have changed my mind about things too. This last half hour, and you offered me your wine flask, Ulrich von Grudges, I will be your friend." For a space, both men were silent, turning over in their minds the wonderful changes this dramatic reconciliation would bring about. In the cold, gloomy forest, the wind tearing in fitful gusts through the naked branches and whistling round the tree trunks. They lay and waited for the help that would now bring release and succor both parties. And each prayed a private prayer that his men might be the first to arrive, so that he might be the first to show honorable attention to the enemy that had become a friend. Presently, as the wind dropped for a moment, Ulrich broke silence. "Let's shout for help," he said. In the lull of our voices may carry a little way." "They won't carry far through the trees and undergrowth," said George, "but we can try. Together then. Hello!" The two raised their voices in prolonged hunting call. Together again, said Ulrich a few minutes later. After listening in vain for an answering. I heard nothing but the pestilent wind, said George hoarsely. There was silence again for some minutes, and then Ulrich gave a joyful cry. I see figures coming through the wood. They are following in the way I came down the hillside. Both men raised their voices in a loud shout as they could all they could muster. They hear us. They've stopped. Now they see us. They're running down the hill towards us, cried Ulrich. How many of them are there? Said George. I can't see distinctly, said Ulrich. 9 or 10? Then they are yours, said George. I had only 7 out with me. They're making all the speed they can. Brave lads, said Ulrich gladly. Are they your men? Asked George. Are they your men? He repeated impatiently, as Ulrich did not answer. No, said Ulrich with a laugh, the idiotic chattering laugh of a man unstrung with hideous fear. Who are they? George asked, quickly, straining his eyes to see what the other would gladly not have. Wolves. Thank you. So, this story, it was long, so thank you for your patience. It talks about obviously the destructive nature of hate, and there's a few morals that come out of it. So the impact of long-standing grudges. So many people today experience or witness grudges or long-standing feuds among friends, cliques, or even within families. The story invites reflection on how holding on to grudges for long periods of time can harm relationships and prevent growth. It can be tied to the idea that in the end, these long-term conflicts often seem trivial or pointless in the face of larger life realities. The power of reconciliation. We often experience moments of conflict with peers, whether due to miscommunication, jealousy, or other emotional factors. The story could serve as a reminder of the potential for reconciliation between communities like us here in Canada, especially also with adolescents navigating friendships and social groups. The idea of resolving conflict before it escalates might resonate with many of you, as could short-lived nature of time and how quickly situations can change. The role of fate and irony. The youth of today are often grappling with an uncertain future and a rapidly changing world, dealing with issues like climate change, social media pressures, and the uncertainty of academic and professional paths. The story might be seen as a metaphor for how unforeseen events can alter the course of life, stressing the importance of making peace and valuing the present moment before it's too late. Thank you for listening.